Love is a lie we tell ourselves until it becomes real, or so we think. Tyler Richards, the CEO of Richards Enterprises, leaned back in his chair, gazing out over the Manhattan skyline. The lights below flickered like stars trapped in the concrete jungle, a city of dreams and broken promises. But Tyler knew better than most that dreams were for the naive. He had once believed in love, until it betrayed him, leaving him with nothing but an empire built on power and cold logic. No, love was for the weak, the ones who still clung to childish fantasies. Now, he was a man of business, and business only. When his family's lawyer had suggested a contract marriage to save face, Tyler had agreed without hesitation. It was simple, a well-respected woman, a respectable union, and no emotional strings attached. Enter Lena Williams, the woman he had never wanted to meet. Yet here she was, standing in front of him as his soon-to-be wife in a contract that held no promise of anything but survival. She was stunning, confident, and not what he expected. Her eyes, dark and full of ambition, met his with a quiet strength that intrigued him. It should have made him want to run the other way, but instead, it made him curious. She was nothing like the women he had once dated. Fragile, needy, constantly seeking affection. Lena had her own dreams, her own path. She wasn't here for love. She was here for security, just like him. But the truth was, Tyler had underestimated her. He had thought the contract would be just that, words on paper, something that held no weight, no heart. But Lena, with her calm demeanor and quiet intelligence, was about to teach him something about life, and about love, that he had long forgotten. They met once more in his penthouse, the high-rise apartment that overlooked the city, the empire he had built. The cold, modern decor did nothing to mask the tension between them. Tyler had already made up his mind that this would be just a business arrangement. But as Lena entered, her presence filled the room in a way he hadn't expected. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't intimidated by his wealth, his power, or his name. She was a woman who knew what she wanted, and she wasn't about to let him dictate her life. They exchanged pleasantries, the usual formalities, but the moment they spoke, Tyler noticed something change in him. It wasn't love, not yet, but something was stirring beneath the surface. The way she held herself, the way her eyes sparkled with intelligence, it made him question everything he thought he knew about relationships. Was this truly just a contract? Or was there something deeper at play here, something he wasn't ready to admit? Tyler shook the thought away. He wasn't here for feelings, and neither was Lena. They both had something to gain from this arrangement, and nothing more. Or so he thought. As the evening wore on, Lena's calm confidence and quiet strength began to unsettle him. She wasn't the type of woman who would be swayed by charm or power. No, she was stronger than that. And for the first time in years, Tyler Richards wasn't sure who was in control anymore. The first few weeks of their marriage were exactly as Tyler had expected. Lena kept her distance, maintaining a professional demeanor at all times. Their conversations were brief and impersonal, focusing only on the logistics of their contract. She never pushed him, never asked for more than what was outlined in their agreement. Tyler, in turn, kept his emotions tightly controlled, never allowing himself to show any vulnerability. But something about Lena's presence began to gnaw at him, like a small crack in the foundation of the walls he had so carefully built around his heart. It wasn't that she was trying to change him. No, Lena didn't seem interested in changing anyone. She was simply herself, strong, quiet, and self-assured. That was what unsettled him. Lena wasn't a damsel in distress. She didn't need him, and that made Tyler question everything he knew about relationships. He had built his empire with determination, sacrificing everything for success. Love, in his mind, had always been a weakness. Yet, as the days passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Lena than he had first realized. There was a depth to her, a quiet strength that seemed to mirror the very empire he had built. He watched her as she moved around their home, always composed, always graceful. She never asked for anything beyond what was necessary, never demanded his attention or affection. She simply existed alongside him, as though they were two separate entities sharing the same space. It was this very independence that intrigued him. Lena wasn't trying to win him over, nor was she seeking his approval. She had her own life, her own goals, and it seemed as if she didn't need him at all. And yet, there were moments, fleeting and subtle, when Tyler could sense something in her eyes, a spark of something more. It was as if she was waiting for him to notice, waiting for him to see that there was more to her than the cold contract they had signed. One evening, as Tyler sat alone in his study, staring out at the city below, he found himself thinking about Lena more than he cared to admit. He had always prided himself on being a man of logic, a man who didn't let emotions cloud his judgment. But Lena was different. She was a challenge, and challenges intrigued him. Just then, the door to his study opened, and Lena stepped in, her presence as commanding as ever. She looked at him for a moment, her eyes unwavering, before speaking. "I'm going to be working late tonight," she said, her voice steady. "I'll see you in the morning." Tyler nodded, but as she turned to leave, something in him stirred. "Lena," he called out, his voice quiet but firm. She stopped and looked back at him, waiting. "Are you happy with this arrangement?" he asked, his tone unreadable. There was a long pause before she answered. "I'm content," she said simply, before walking out, leaving Tyler alone with his thoughts. Those words lingered in his mind long after she had gone. "I'm content." It wasn't a confession of love, nor was it a rejection of the life they had built together. It was the answer of a woman who had learned to make peace with her circumstances, who had accepted the life she was given without complaint. Tyler couldn't help but wonder if he would ever truly understand her. The thought gnawed at him, pulling him deeper into a place he didn't want to go, a place where feelings and emotions took precedence over logic and control. And for the first time in a long while, Tyler Richards found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about love, power, and the life he had chosen to live. The days that followed were a quiet storm. Tyler found himself watching Lena more often than he cared to admit. It wasn't overt, just fleeting glances when she wasn't looking, the way she carried herself through their home, her calm presence filling the space in a way he had never experienced before. She wasn't like the women he had been with in the past. They had all been in search of something, attention, approval, love. But Lena? She didn't need any of that. She was self-contained, confident, and didn't rely on him for validation. And that, more than anything, unsettled him. He had always been in control. In business, in life, in love, everything was calculated. But with Lena, he was no longer sure. It was subtle at first, the way she moved through their life together as if their contract didn't weigh heavily on her. She didn't demand anything beyond what was necessary, but there were moments, small moments, that made Tyler question his own feelings. One evening, Tyler returned home after a long day of meetings, his mind still racing with numbers and strategies. As he entered the apartment, he found Lena standing by the window, staring out at the city. The soft light of the setting sun bathed her in a golden glow, and for a moment, Tyler forgot to breathe. She wasn't looking at him, but something about the way she stood there, so composed and peaceful, made him pause. She turned to him, as if sensing his presence. "You're home late," she said, her voice quiet but not accusatory. "Had a long day," Tyler replied, his tone neutral. "You seem distant," she said, her eyes searching his face. Tyler stiffened. How could she see through him so easily? He had spent years building walls, creating a fortress of indifference, but Lena had a way of slipping past his defenses without even trying. "I'm fine," he said, trying to dismiss her concern. "Are you?" she asked, a slight tilt of her head. It wasn't an aggressive question, nor was it one of those probing, invasive questions people asked when they wanted something. It was simply a genuine inquiry, as if she truly cared. The moment hung in the air, thick with unspoken words, and for a fleeting second, Tyler considered telling her the truth. Telling her how, despite everything, despite the contract, despite his firm belief that love was a weakness, he found himself wondering about her. Wondering if, somehow, she could make him believe again. But he said nothing. Instead, he walked past her and towards the bar. The evening went on in silence, neither of them pushing for more. It was an unspoken agreement between them. They both understood the boundaries, understood that their relationship, however real it might feel at times, was still bound by the terms of a contract. Yet, that night, as Tyler lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that things were changing. Lena had always been strong, but lately, it felt like something else was happening between them, something neither of them had planned for. She wasn't just his wife on paper anymore. She was something more, and Tyler wasn't sure if he was ready for that. Lena, however, seemed unfazed by the shift. She was still the same, calm, steady, a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she wanted. Tyler could sense that she had long since made peace with their arrangement. She wasn't here for love. She was here for security, for stability, and she had learned to carve out a life within those parameters. But every once in a while, Tyler saw the flicker of something else in her eyes. It was subtle, but it was there, a spark of desire, of something deeper. And that, more than anything, made Tyler question everything he had come to believe about relationships, about love, and about the woman who had somehow managed to make him feel more than he ever thought possible. It had been several weeks since that night in the study, and Tyler could feel the shift between them more acutely with each passing day. Lena remained the same, calm, collected, and seemingly indifferent to the growing tension in their relationship. She wasn't chasing after affection, and she certainly wasn't trying to change him. But every so often, Tyler caught her looking at him differently, as if she could see straight through the carefully constructed walls he had built around himself. It unsettled him more than he cared to admit. One afternoon, Tyler found himself standing in his office, staring out at the city below, when Lena's voice broke through his thoughts. "I'm leaving for a business trip tomorrow," she said. Her tone was neutral, but there was an undertone of something that Tyler couldn't quite place. "Are you?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of surprise. "It's just a quick trip," she replied. "Nothing major. I'll be back in a few days." Tyler nodded, watching her as she turned to leave. For some reason, the thought of her being gone bothered him. It wasn't just that he was used to her presence. It was something more. He wasn't sure when it had started, but he didn't want her to go. The next day, as he went about his business, he found his thoughts drifting back to Lena. He couldn't remember the last time he had wanted someone to stay. In the past, his relationships had been nothing more than transactions, and he had been perfectly fine with that. But Lena was different. She wasn't asking for anything, but she was making him feel something he hadn't felt in years, something raw and unexpected. Later that evening, as he walked through the penthouse, he caught sight of her suitcase by the door. The realization hit him suddenly. She was really leaving. "Lena," he called, his voice more urgent than he had intended. She turned to face him, raising an eyebrow. "Yes. Are you sure you want to go?" The question hung in the air, heavier than Tyler had anticipated. Lena studied him for a moment, her eyes piercing through him with a quiet intensity. "I have to go," she said simply. "This is what we agreed upon, remember?" Tyler opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. He didn't know what he wanted to say. All he knew was that he didn't want her to leave. The tension between them was thick, a tangible thing that neither of them knew how to navigate. For a moment, there was silence. Tyler stood there, his mind racing, while Lena watched him, waiting. Finally, she spoke again. "You're not going to ask me to stay, are you?" Her voice was soft, but there was a hint of amusement in it, as if she could already see the internal battle he was fighting. "I'm not sure what I want," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Lena's expression softened, just slightly. "That's the problem, Tyler," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "You've spent so long pretending that you know what you want, but you've never actually allowed yourself to feel anything. You're afraid of letting go, of letting someone in." Tyler didn't respond. He didn't know how to. She was right in a way. He had spent his whole life building walls, protecting himself from getting hurt. But now, standing in front of Lena, he couldn't help but feel the cracks beginning to form. She wasn't like anyone else he had known. She didn't need his approval, didn't need his affection, but somehow, she had managed to make him want to give it to her. Lena picked up her suitcase and slung the strap over her shoulder. "I'll be back soon," she said, her voice no longer soft but resolute. "But when I come back, I need you to figure out what you want. Because if you don't, you'll lose me. And I'm not coming back for someone who can't make up his mind." With that, she turned and walked out the door, leaving Tyler standing there, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what to do with the feelings that had suddenly rushed to the surface. For the first time in a long while, Tyler Richards felt uncertain about the path he had chosen. He had always been in control, but now, control was slipping from his grasp, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he was afraid to let go. Tyler spent the following days lost in a haze of uncertainty. Lena's words haunted him, echoing in his mind every time he tried to focus. "You've spent so long pretending that you know what you want, but you've never actually allowed yourself to feel anything. It wasn't the first time someone had called him out on his emotional distance, but this time, it felt different. The weight of her words was heavier, more real. He couldn't escape the truth that she had laid before him. That night, he found himself sitting at his desk, papers scattered around him, but his thoughts were a million miles away. His empire was still growing, his company was still thriving, but there was something hollow in it all. He couldn't even remember the last time he felt proud of his success. It had always been about proving something to himself, to the world. But now, with Lena gone, none of it mattered. He missed her in a way he hadn't expected. Her absence filled the apartment in a way he couldn't describe. The silence in their home was deafening. The routine that had once been comforting now felt empty. He needed to see her again. He needed to figure out what he wanted before it was too late. The next morning, he found himself at the airport. He didn't even know why he was going. He just knew he had to. He had to make things right. As soon as he stepped off the plane, Tyler called her. "Lena," he said, his voice steady but uncertain. "Where are you?" "I'm in my hotel room," Lena replied, her tone neutral. "What do you want, Tyler?" Her directness made his heart race. This wasn't how he had imagined this conversation going, but it was happening. "I need to talk to you," he said. There was a pause before she responded. "Fine. Meet me downstairs in 30 minutes. Tyler rushed to the hotel, his mind spinning with the possibilities. When he arrived at the lobby, he saw Lena standing by the elevator, her back straight, her posture exuding the same confidence he had come to admire. But there was something different in her eyes now, something more guarded, like she was protecting herself from him. He approached her cautiously, not sure what to say. "I've been thinking," he started, his voice hesitant, "about everything you said." Lena's expression softened, but she didn't interrupt. "And?" she asked. "And I think you were right," Tyler admitted, his gaze locked with hers. "I've spent my life avoiding feelings, avoiding real connections. I built an empire, but I never built anything real, not until you." Lena studied him for a moment, her eyes unreadable. "I don't want your empire, Tyler," she said quietly. "I want you. But I need to know that you can let go of everything that's holding you back before I can be part of your life. I'm not here to fix you, Tyler. You have to do that yourself." Her words hit him harder than anything she had said before. For the first time, Tyler understood. He hadn't just been avoiding love. He had been avoiding himself. Avoiding the vulnerability that came with letting someone in. He had built walls around himself, and Lena had been the only one who had managed to find the cracks. "I don't know if I can change," Tyler confessed, his voice raw with emotion. "But I want to try. I don't want to lose you, Lena." Lena's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, Tyler saw the woman he had come to admire, the one who was strong enough to challenge him, but also gentle enough to care. She stepped closer, her presence calming him. "You don't have to be perfect," she said softly. "You just have to be willing to try." Tyler nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was in control, and it was the most freeing feeling he had ever experienced. As they stood there, in the quiet of the hotel lobby, something shifted between them. Tyler wasn't sure where this would lead, but for the first time in his life, he was ready to find out. Tyler and Lena spent the following weeks navigating the fragile space between them. It wasn't easy. There were moments of awkwardness, moments when neither of them knew quite what to say, but there was also an undeniable shift. Tyler had made the decision to be more present, to open himself up to the possibility of change, but it was hard. Years of building emotional walls didn't come down in a day. Still, there was progress. Lena didn't expect perfection. She only wanted him to try, and in doing so, Tyler began to realize just how much he had been missing in his life. He had spent so long focusing on success, on maintaining control, that he had neglected the very thing that made life worth living: connection. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about something deeper, something he had once dismissed as a weakness: love. One evening, after dinner, Tyler found himself sitting next to Lena on the balcony of their penthouse, the city skyline stretching out before them. The air was cool, and the lights of Manhattan twinkled in the distance. For the first time in what felt like forever, Tyler wasn't thinking about work or his empire. He was simply present, sitting next to the woman who had somehow changed everything. Lena was quiet beside him, her gaze focused on the horizon. Tyler couldn't help but admire the way she carried herself, strong, independent, but also open in a way he never thought he could be. "Lena," he began, his voice softer than usual. "I've been thinking about what you said, about needing to let go." She turned to look at him, her eyes calm and steady. "And?" she asked. "I think I've been holding on to all the wrong things," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been holding on to control, to power, to everything that doesn't matter. And in doing that, I've pushed away the one thing that does matter. You." Lena's gaze softened, and for a moment, there was silence between them. She didn't respond immediately, but Tyler could feel the weight of her presence beside him. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a silence that held meaning, that held the promise of something real. Finally, she spoke. "You're not the only one who's had to let go, Tyler," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I've had to let go of the idea that I could fix you, that I could make you feel something you weren't ready to feel. But I've learned something, too." "What's that?" Tyler asked, his curiosity piqued. "That sometimes, the best thing we can do for each other is simply to be here," she said. "Not trying to change one another, but accepting who we are in the moment." Tyler felt a weight lift off his chest. For the first time, he didn't feel like he had to be someone he wasn't. He didn't have to have everything figured out. All he needed was to be present, to embrace the journey they were on together, no matter how uncertain it seemed. "I want that," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I want to be here, with you." Lena looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if looking for the truth in his words. After a long moment, she nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Then we'll take it one step at a time," she said. And in that moment, Tyler realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of the future. He wasn't afraid of what would come next, because for once, he was willing to face it with someone who understood him, who saw him for who he truly was. Not as the billionaire CEO, but as the man who had been willing to change, to take a chance on love. And Lena? She wasn't asking him to be perfect. She was simply asking him to be real. And that was enough. As the weeks went by, Tyler and Lena continued their journey, each day a step closer to something they couldn't quite define. But both knew was real. There were no grand gestures, no declarations of love, just small moments of understanding and connection that built a foundation stronger than anything Tyler had ever known. It wasn't always easy. There were times when old habits crept in, when Tyler's need for control resurfaced, and there were moments when Lena's distance made him feel like they were miles apart. But every time, they found their way back to each other, to the quiet space they had created together. One evening, Tyler found himself in the conference room of his office, staring at the spreadsheets in front of him, but his mind wasn't on the numbers. It was on Lena. He had been thinking about her a lot lately, more than usual. He wasn't sure if it was the way she had changed him or the way he had changed for her, but there was something different now, something that made him feel like he wasn't alone anymore. It wasn't just the quiet companionship they shared. It was something deeper, something he had been afraid to acknowledge. He didn't want to admit it, not to himself, not to anyone, but he cared for her, in a way that went beyond the arrangement they had. And in that moment, he realized that it wasn't just about being present anymore. It was about being real, truly real with her. He had spent so much of his life building walls, avoiding anything that might make him vulnerable. But with Lena, the walls were coming down, piece by piece. He knew it was time to do something about it. Tyler closed his laptop, stood up, and walked toward the door. He couldn't ignore it any longer. He had to talk to her. He found her sitting on the balcony, as she often did in the evenings, the city lights casting a soft glow on her face. There was a peacefulness about her, a quiet confidence that Tyler admired. He stood there for a moment, just watching her, before she turned and caught his gaze. "What's on your mind?" she asked, her voice calm but curious. Tyler walked over to her, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been one for vulnerability, never been one to share his feelings so openly. But something about Lena made him want to change that. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice steady, but filled with something deeper. "About everything. About us." Lena didn't say anything, but her gaze softened, and she waited for him to continue. "I know I've been holding back," Tyler said, his words coming more easily than he expected. "I've been trying to protect myself, but the truth is, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to be afraid of feeling something. I don't want to be afraid of you." Lena's expression shifted, her eyes searching his face. "Tyler," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. You don't have to be afraid of me. You just have to be honest with yourself. And with me. The simplicity of her words hit him harder than anything else. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about fixing everything at once. It was about being real, being honest, and letting himself experience what he had been afraid to for so long. For the first time in a long time, Tyler allowed himself to truly feel. And in that moment, he knew that he was ready for whatever came next. Because with Lena by his side, he no longer felt alone. He wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid to take that next step. Lena stood up and walked over to him, her presence calming the storm inside him. It's going to take time, she said, her voice full of understanding. But I'm here, Tyler. We're in this together. And just like that, the uncertainty that had once clouded his mind began to fade. With Lena's quiet strength beside him, Tyler felt ready to face whatever came next. He didn't know if this was love or if it was something else entirely. But what he did know was that he wasn't afraid to find out. For the first time, Tyler wasn't just building an empire. He was building something real, something that mattered, with someone who made him believe that maybe, just maybe, love wasn't as impossible as he once thought. It had been a few months since that night on the balcony, and Tyler had changed in ways he never thought possible. Lena had given him the space to find his own path, but she had also been there every step of the way, offering support when he needed it, and stepping back when he needed to figure things out on his own. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were no dramatic declarations of love, no grand gestures. But there was something real. They were building something together, slowly but surely, piece by piece. Tyler found himself thinking more about what he wanted, not just for his empire, but for his life. He didn't want to go back to the person he had been, the man who had built his success on walls, on keeping people at arm's length. He wanted something more, something deeper. And Lena was the one who had made him believe that it was possible. It was late one evening when Tyler returned home after a long day of meetings. He had been working harder than usual, trying to balance his business with the changes he was making in his personal life. But tonight felt different. He had missed Lena more than usual. He had been so consumed with work that he hadn't realized how much he had grown to rely on her presence, her steady, calm energy that grounded him. When he entered the apartment, he found her sitting at the kitchen island, a book in her hand, a soft light illuminating the room. There was a quiet peace about her, a sense of comfort that filled the space. "You're home late," Lena said, looking up from her book. Tyler smiled, though he felt the weight of everything he had been thinking. "I know. I just needed to get away from the office for a bit," he said, walking over to where she sat her day. "I missed you." There it was. The words he had been afraid to say, but now, they came so easily. Lena's eyes softened, and she put the book down, standing up to meet him. "I missed you too," she said, her voice quiet but filled with sincerity. Tyler took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle between them. He had been carrying this feeling inside for so long, but now it felt like everything was finally falling into place. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of it. "Lena," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't know what I expected when we first met, but I never imagined that you would change my life the way you have. You've helped me realize that there's more to life than just work. There's more to life than control. There's love, and there's real connection. And I don't want to let that go." Lena reached up and touched his face, her fingers warm against his skin. "Tyler," she said softly, "you don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to be perfect. I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for you." Tyler felt something inside him shift. It wasn't a grand epiphany, but it was something deep, something he couldn't ignore anymore. It wasn't just about being present. It wasn't just about trying to change. It was about being with someone who accepted him for who he was and who was willing to build something real together. And for the first time, Tyler believed that maybe he could. "I'm ready," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm ready to be with you, Lena. Not just as a contract, not just as an arrangement, but as us." Lena smiled, her eyes lighting up with something more than just understanding. "Then let's take this one step at a time," she said, her voice filled with warmth. Tyler nodded, a smile tugging at his lips. They weren't there yet. They still had a long way to go. But for the first time, Tyler felt like he was on the right path. He wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't afraid anymore. And with Lena by his side, he knew that together, They could build something that was real, something that wasn't about control or power or money. It was about love, trust, and the quiet moments that made everything worth it. Tyler and Lena had come a long way since that first meeting, a journey that neither of them could have predicted. The months that followed were not without their challenges, but for the first time in Tyler's life, he felt like he was truly living, not just existing. He had always been a man who thrived on control, who built his world around order and precision. But with Lena by his side, everything had changed. She had opened his eyes to a world where emotions were not a weakness, but a strength. She had shown him that it was okay to let go, to feel, and to trust. It wasn't just about love, it was about growth. One evening, as Tyler walked into their shared home, he felt a calmness in the air, a peace that had settled between them over time. He had learned to let go of the grip he had on his life, and in doing so, he had discovered a new sense of freedom. Lena had taught him that vulnerability was not a threat, but a doorway to deeper connection. He found her in the kitchen, preparing dinner. Her presence was soothing, her movements graceful, and in that moment, Tyler knew that this was what it was all about. He wasn't alone anymore, and he didn't want to be. He had found something real, something worth fighting for. "Dinner's almost ready," Lena said, her voice light as she turned to greet him. Tyler smiled, his heart full. "I'm not sure how I got so lucky," he said, walking over to her. "Lucky?" Lena raised an eyebrow. "I think we both got lucky." Tyler's smile softened as he reached out to gently take her hand in his. "I mean it, Lena. You've changed everything for me. I've never known peace like this, never known what it feels like to truly share my life with someone." Lena's eyes met his, and for a moment, the weight of all the unspoken words between them hung in the air. "I'm glad you're here," she said quietly. Tyler squeezed her hand, his heart swelling with emotion. "Me too," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere." It wasn't a promise that was said lightly. It was a promise born from the depths of everything he had learned, from the journey he had taken with her, from the man he had become. They had both come to realize that love was not just an emotion. It was a choice. A choice to open up, to trust, and to build something real together. And that was exactly what they were doing. Building. Together. Dinner was simple that evening, but the conversation that flowed between them was anything but. It wasn't about grand gestures or big moments. It was about the small, quiet moments that made up their lives. It was about the laughter they shared, the support they gave each other, and the understanding that had grown between them. Tyler knew that this was just the beginning. They had only scratched the surface of what they could build, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. He was ready to embrace the uncertainty, ready to face whatever challenges came their way. And as Lena looked at him across the table, her eyes soft and knowing, Tyler realized that this quiet, steady love they were building was the greatest achievement of all. It wasn't about control. It wasn't about power. It was about the strength they found in each other, in the vulnerability they shared, and in the trust they had built. And in that moment, Tyler knew, without a doubt, that he had everything he had ever wanted. Not in the empire he had built, not in the wealth he had accumulated, but in the woman sitting across from him, the woman who had taught him what it truly meant to live.